Hello, good morning, and in this video I'm going to be playing with the roof mechanism on my 306 Cabriolet Peugeot. So the first thing to do is to get your roof partially opened and secure it. I tend to use a bungee to hold the roof cover. It's quite a good idea because it reminds you not to open the boot until you close the lid. I just use a bit of cloth to protect the roof, hook it onto the number plate, works a treat. And then here's my problem. I've already replaced the hoses in this Cabriolet on this side, but I got a leak from the stud elbow where it fits into the ram. It's actually the threads there that have gone, so that's what I'm doing today. So I always forget to turn the ignition off, so ignition off, and also disconnect the battery if you're doing anything on your car. Right, then remove the side panel. Now I've got self-tapping screws here. It comes with these sort of plastic rivets, but I had to open and do this, close it so many times. I actually got some self-tapping screws which work much better. Just be careful you don't screw into a hose, because obviously that would ruin your day. That all comes apart quite straightforwardly. And then don't forget to stick something in the drain hole, because you are going to drop a clip doing this, and if it goes down the drain it's going to ruin your day. I get the clips off the ram with just a simple sharp thin, I don't know what you'd call it, bradawl I suppose. Slip it through the clip and give it a pull, and it comes off pretty easily. The rear one, you can take the clip off and do it the way I've just done it on this one here. Actually, I think it's simpler just to undo the four 10mm nuts that hold the bracket that holds the ram in place at the back, and just take the whole thing out as one unit, because even once you've got the clip off, it's actually still a bit of a fiddle faff. So in future I'm not going to bother to do all this. Each of the clips then, once they're off, release a little stud that needs to be slipped out, and I say it's really easy to drop this, so yeah, please make sure you've got this in place. Obviously I'm removing the big rear ram here. The one that tends to leak most commonly is actually the little front one, and I think that's because that's the one that takes the strain if you've forgotten to undo the clip, which we all do, I think. You know, the clips at the front of the roof. So if you don't undo the clips and press the button, then the pressure builds up in that little ram and it leaks. So there you are. That's the ram released, and that's the point. I'm just pointing out where it's leaking from, and that's the bit I'm going to try and sort out. So the next thing you've got to do now is actually get to the boot. So down goes the bungee. I move everything carefully manually when you're doing it. You don't want to force anything. And then it's a good idea to identify which hoses you're going to want to remove. I do that with a bit of white tape. As you can see, I've already got a bit of white tape on there because I've done this before. Work out which of the clips holds the electrics for that ram in place, unclip them, and then you need to undo a size 20 Torx screw holding the hoses in place. It can be a bit of a fiddle faff to get to these, and you'll need a nice thin device to do it, but just unscrew the Torx about 3/4. That's usually enough, and then for goodness sake don't forget to put some tissue underneath it all, because you are going to start leaking hydraulic fluid all over the shop. So get some good padding in place, and then once you've actually undone the Torx screw about 3/4, you can just pull the hydraulic pipes out of their fittings, and it can take a bit of oomph to do that, but they will come out pretty straightforwardly. At this point you will start leaking hydraulic fluid everywhere, so I think it's really important that you contain that as much as you can, particularly as you're going to be now working on these pipes. So what I do is I cut the fingers off a plastic glove and tape that then in place so that they don't cause any mischief. And as you can see, I have got the white mark on one of those hoses, so I know where it goes later. So these are the little sort of mini condoms that I use. Tape them up because you'll be amazed how much they fill up with hydraulic fluid. Obviously you don't necessarily have to do this quite so much if you're actually going to replace these hoses, because obviously you'll be taking them off, but whilst you pull them through, as you'll see later, I just think it saves getting hydraulic fluid everywhere. Of course you might already have hydraulic fluid everywhere because one of them might have split, in which case it's not a problem. So I'm just making sure that everything, like the electrical lead, is all not tied up or caught around anything before we go back to the roof and pull everything through. So this is the fun bit. You can just pick up everything and with any luck nothing will be caught on anything, and you can just pull it all through, and when it's all done and dusted, take it off to the bench, where you can, best to do is hold it in a vise, and as you'll see I hold it in the vise by the elbow piece because I think that's a nice strong place to hold it. This is a 14mm spanner to undo the hydraulic hose, and obviously this is what you'll be doing if you want to replace these hoses. So get these off, and then if you were replacing them, you'll be actually then just doing nothing more but then replacing this bit. I'm obviously now going to actually take the elbow off. You don't need to do this if the elbow isn't leaking, but I'm now undoing the elbow because I need to see if I can get some PTFE tape onto this elbow and stop it leaking. So having loosened it by using the ram itself as a lever, I'm now gently putting the actual ram itself into the vise and using a 12mm, I think it is, spanner, I'm sure it's a 12mm, and removing that. It's really important that if you do have to do this, you're scrupulously clean. I haven't shown this, but you need to really clean the threads, both of the elbow and of the ram. I had previously tried using some Loctite, is it 542, and that had failed, so I had to clean the Loctite off this before trying the PTFE tape, which, as you can see, I'm now just winding onto the threads. I spoke to a couple of people about this and they said really just use a lot. So I must have put, I don't know, 3 or even 4 winds, perhaps even a bit more on there, to try and really make sure that I've got a good seal. And then it screw it in hand tight to begin with, and I don't show it on this clip, but I think I did it up 4 turns. I think I'd talk about doing 3 when I was doing it, but actually I didn't feel it was tight enough at the time, so I actually did an extra turn, which I don't show. But then when that's all done and dusted, it's just a case of putting everything back together again. So here you see I do it and stop at this point, but I actually went and did a further turn, so it had 4 turns in total. And then it's, yeah, this is a bit you'll be doing if you are replacing the hoses with these nice ones. Got these hoses from Cabriolet roof hoses based in Exeter. Chris Porter, very helpful. They are guaranteed for the life of the vehicle. So that's probably about a year. No, they look really good quality. And then it's just a case about threading everything back. And this is where it's really important, A, that you make sure that you've marked which hose goes where, but also this is where, because I'm replacing the same hoses, by the time I'd done this they were full of hydraulic fluid, little condoms, so there would have been hydraulic fluid everywhere. So that goes in place there. Just the hoses are a bit like garden hoses. You've got to sort of rotate them and get them sort of to sort of twist and turn to get them to sit right. Then it's a case of putting the clips back into place, and once again, do please make sure that you've covered the drain. I know I've gone on about it a bit, but it really is a classic thing. I actually dropped these twice doing this, trying to get the front ones on. Here's the little gadget I use that goes through the clip, and then I can just push it on, and that seems to work really effectively. But as I say, you could have just undone those 4 10mm bolts and taken the whole of that black bracket out. This is the front going in, and I actually dropped it at this point, but I don't show me faffing about trying to pick it up. But yeah, I'd actually dropped it twice. But then on goes the clip in the same way, and this certainly is the only way I could do the front clip. So thread it through, and then you can just ease it on and push it on with the little screwdriver. Worked very well. And then when that's all done, you're basically now going to go into the boot and find where all your threaded through hoses have gone. Oh yeah, before you do that, you can put the cover back on. As I say, I would thoroughly recommend you use self-tapping screws, because you'll be back. Unfortunately, you'll be back. Yeah, so clip on the electrics, don't forget those, and then undo my little condoms, which are absolutely full of fluid now. Of course, if you're using brand new hoses, that won't be the case. You'll have nice, hopefully pretty dry, or they may leak a little bit. But yeah, undo those and clip them into place. And once again, it can be a bit of a fiddle doing this. You need to, I found that actually having the Torx bolt completely off made it impossible to thread it into place once the hoses were in place. So I suggest you have the Torx bolt in place, about 3/4 undone, and then you just push fit the hoses into the aluminium block, and that is literally a case of just pushing them in place. But once again, you'll notice that you've got to sort of twist the hoses around to get them to align, and because Cabriolet roof hoses just do 2 lengths, the lengths are a bit long for this side. They're 1.3 meters, so you'll see you need to sort of work out how to rotate them round to sort of sit nicely. So they will be longer than you need. In they go, and then it's the Torx 20 again, screwdriver to tighten the Torx screw up, and just make sure those hoses sit flush and tight and nicely. If you bought new hoses, the little black rubber seals that should go on each end of the hose actually are in a separate little plastic bag in with the pack. So do make sure that you've fitted those onto the end of your hoses before you do this, otherwise it's going to leak everywhere. So once that's tightened up good and proper, you'll then need to refill the reservoir with hydraulic fluid. Now that's a 13mm bolt that's on there. I actually usually only do it up hand tight, because for the last month I've been having to refill it every now and again because obviously I had a leak. I actually had done it a bit tighter, so I had to do a couple of turns with a spanner, but yeah, I would normally suggest just hand tight is perfectly good enough. Now as far as the oils are concerned, you can buy the genuine stuff. It's got a Peugeot hydraulic fluid. I think I'll show you the number there, you can see it, but it's 9735.57. That's the part number. It's quite expensive. I think that bottle cost me £19. Or you can go to Halfords and just use their Jack fluid. That's entirely fine. So refill your reservoir, then pop the roof up and down a couple of times, 3 or 4 times, and you will then need to make sure that the reservoir is topped up again, because particularly if you're replacing new hoses, there's a lot of fluid that needs to be put into them, so you just check on that. You may also find that the fluid looks a bit foamy, and I think that's because of air being pushed out of the system. So there you go. I hope that's been helpful. It's not as tricky as you think, and I know that for a lot of people the roof is the bit that makes them decide they're going to, get rid of the car because it's been too much of a pain. But actually, If you just remember to unclip the front clips on the roof before you press the button, you won't damage the roof, and if you do, you can replace the hoses actually much easier than you perhaps think. So there we go. I hope that was good.